Thank you for joining us on this Friday morning. The sun is shining here in Brighton, so I hope it's a good day wherever you are as well. For those that, sorry, where I don't even know where you are, Karen. Where are you based?
Leeds, West Yorkshire.
Oh right. Oh, and it's sunny with you?
Yes.
Great. Must be everywhere. So for those of you who haven't met me before, my name's Fran Stovold and I'm the Workforce Development Lead for Sporting Heritage. So I look after all the webinars and the networks and the hangouts and the conference. We're very lucky today to have Karen and Callum with us from Creative Inc. agency, who are going to lead the main part of the session. Karen will talk a little bit more detail about the structure of the session, but if you've got any questions as we're going along, please put them in the chat thread and we will pick them up at the end. If you can mute yourselves as we're going through the presentation, that would be great, just so that we don't have any sound interfering with the recording. And if you have any technical difficulties, if you drop out, please just rejoin using the same login details and I will keep an eye on the waiting room. So I think that's probably all our housekeeping sorted out right from the start. So Karen, I think I'll hand straight over to you.
Oh, good morning, everybody. My name is Karen from Creative Inc. agency, and we have been appointed to run this presentation, Introduction to Web Accessibility for Sporting Heritage. We are also at the moment working with Sporting Heritage on actually fixing their website to make it fully accessible. So that is just a bit of explanation why we are here. And these are our contact details, and I just want to give you a little bit of an insight of our story on how we got here. Creative Inc. agency was founded in July 2019 by myself and my son Callum, and that was following a bad experience with Callum's employer. The digital agency that he was working for refused to make reasonable adjustments to accommodate his autism, and he had to leave. So we wanted to take that as a positive opportunity to change perceptions, and we set up our own web development agency to change perceptions about autism in the workplace and to create a fully inclusive business model. And today we've progressed to designing and developing fully accessible digital platforms and also train other web agencies, developers and companies with in-house digital departments to do the same. And overall, we are on a mission to make the UK digitally inclusive by 2025, and we can't do this by ourselves. So we are always grateful for any support that we can get in spreading the mission. So our contact details are here if you want to take a note of them, but I think Fran is also putting them in the chat later on, so that if you have any questions that come to you later, you can always contact us or want some more information or, you know, just want to have a chat, just get in touch. Right, with this webinar, we want you to understand what web accessibility is, because most people don't know what it is. Learn how people with disabilities use the web and the barriers they face on websites that are not well designed, because there are a lot of different people with special access needs, and the people are not aware really that they struggle. You should also, after the webinar, recognize why web accessibility is important for you. I know they're not just business owners here, but also decision makers, people that are perhaps researchers, or people that maybe look into funding opportunities. And also find out what you can do to check your website for accessibility. That is the part that Callum will do, and fix any issues. Now, what we really want to do with, not only with this webinar, but in our mission, is that we actually make people aware of the problems around web accessibility, educate them, and therefore change their perception, and then really for them to encourage them to take action. Now, first of all, the definition of web accessibility. Web accessibility has been floating around for about 20 plus years since Tim Berners-Lee invented the internet. He actually wanted to make it accessible to everybody, and somehow a lot of people have got left behind, because web accessibility means that websites must be designed and developed so that people with disabilities and special access requirements can use them. So it really is an accessible website, can be used by everyone. There are no barriers. Now, this is achieved by allowing people to perceive, understand the information on the website, and then navigate the site and interact with it. This is based on the Global Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. In the UK, we would call them for short WCAG. The Americans call them WCAG. And WCAG refers to the POUR principles, and that is perceivable, which is about making information accessible and available to everybody in different formats. Then operable is the best functionality for all users, so that actually the website can be used. Understandable is that all the information on a website or a web platform can actually be understood by the user. And the third one is robust, and that is about compatibility with assistive technology, but also with mobile devices. We have a link of the source, the WCAGs in, I hope that Fran is going to put that in the chat. And then if you want to copy that, you can have a look at that. It's a very brief outline, but it goes into more detail than I have gone into. Now, all disabilities and impairments are affected by web accessibility. And I think that is very, very important to note. And what are all these disabilities and impairments? That's what I want to describe to you next. So we're starting with auditory. We have actually started with auditory impairments and disability first, because they are actually the disabilities that are often forgotten about in websites, because people think, oh, it is actually a visual medium, and it is mainly, but we cannot forget about people that can't hear or have difficulty hearing, because they cannot access videos or podcasts without captions or text alternatives on a website. They cannot contact if only telephone numbers are stated. There are a lot of corporate organizations that may just give a telephone number for contact and no email addresses. So it is very, very important that we're not forgetting about people with auditory disabilities. Now, this speech impediments actually also feed into that, because again, people with a speech impediment, let's say a lot of people that are deaf and can speak, they have speech impediments. There are also people that have a stammer, or people that have just a speech impediment and are difficult to understand. Now, for them, it is very, very important as well that they have contact options other than telephone numbers. Now we get into cognitive disabilities, and with that we are talking about autism, ADHD, dyspraxia, dyslexia, but also color blindness or other learning difficulties. There is a whole range, a whole spectrum of cognitive difficulties that people may have. Now, users with cognitive impairments need very clear instructions so that it's not ambiguous what they're seeing, so that they can actually perceive it in a format and in a way that they can deal with it, that they can understand it. that also includes a good color contrast, not just for colorblind people who may not recognize the contrast between certain colors. It is also for people like Callum with autism, for example. He struggles with certain color contrasts. When he sees a lot of text, black text on a white background, it starts swimming in front of his eyes. So a good color contrast and options there is really, really important. The same for readable font and size. There are, especially autistic and dyslexic people, favor certain fonts, or not only favor them, they cannot read fonts that are very, like sort of have a lot of fancy bows around them. And we call them serif fonts. So sans serif fonts, it's quite important that they are used on web platforms so that everybody can read them. The size as well, some people cannot read small text, so have a good size of text and an uncluttered layout. Because especially, let's say, people with ADHD really struggle with cluttered website layout, where everything sort of jumps at them. There are images all over the place and text underneath, in between, and the website just looks untidy, and that distracts them so much that they would not be able to take in any of the information on the site. Now, the next disability and impairment is neurological. We're talking about epilepsy here, obviously people that have seizures, but also people with dementia. And for them, again, people with dementia need very clear text and instructions. People with epilepsy, there should be no flashing content on a website, or there should be options where the flashing content can be stopped. A lot of people have these sliders where the pictures sort of follow, and that has to be very slow, or there has to be an option where it actually can be paused. Then we come to physical disabilities. Now we've got here cerebral palsy, spinal cord injuries, amputation, multiple sclerosis, and these people use assistive technology, or actually use just keyboard navigation, which means they cannot use a mouse or a trackpad for certain reasons. They may have shaky hands, they may not have any kind of strength in the hands, and so tabbing with a tab key through the keyboard is the only way for them to actually access the information on a website and go through the website and navigate it. Now, the same is with assistive technology. The tags that are used in keyboard accessibility are actually also used for assistive technology. And a lot of people that have physical disabilities may have to use something that they put in their mouth and direct the website with that. And that would only go through the keyboard. Now, low vision and blind. Now, that really covers a whole a great range of spectrum, because with low vision, we can also talk about people that just, can't see very well due to age, or people who have obviously impairments, and then the blind people. Now, for low vision sufferers, they again need a very good color contrast, a readable font, and the size needs to be right. And for the blind, who use assistive technology in form of a screen reader most of the time, where the screen reader actually reads out to the blind person what exactly is on the side, and that is done by the screen reader actually going into the code of the website and using the tags in the code to move along the website. So for that, a logical layout is needed. You cannot have a header structure where the top header is at the bottom and the screen reader goes right to the bottom and then jumps up to the top to read that bit and then jumps to the middle. There needs to be a logical structure so that the screen reader actually reads out in sequence how a person would actually see the website. That also includes text alternatives for images. And if you have an image that is important to understand what it is on the website, you need to give it text alternatives, because they will be picked up by the screen reader and they will be read out to the user. Otherwise, it will just say graphic, graphic, graphic. And that also applies to videos. If possible, you should have not only captions, but also text alternatives for the videos and explain what is happening in the video. Now, that is visual impairments, but for other users without disabilities, it is really important that a website is accessible as well. We're talking here about mobile phone users, and that is really also falls into the robust principle of the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. But mobile phone users, imagine you are outside and you want to go onto a website. It's a beautiful day like today, and there is a yellow background with white text. You will not be able to see anything on that website. But if you have a dark background and white text, you will be able to see that. So color contrast is really important here. The same for people with very small screens like smartwatches or other devices with small screens and different input modes. It's very important to think of these people as well. Now, older people with age-related change in abilities, arthritis, low vision, we've already covered that, dementia. We need to think about people like that as well and make the website accessible to those people as well. Sight users with temporary disabilities, such as a broken arm or lost glasses. If you have broken your right arm and you are right-handed, then it will be difficult for you to use a mouse or trackpad, and then you would have to use a keyboard to navigate through the website. Also, let's say you've lost your glasses, but you haven't got access to them and you need to see what is on the website, then a good size of text and font will help as well. Sight users with situational limitations, such as bright sunlight or noise-sensitive environments, where they cannot listen to audio or on a train or in the office, that's very important. I've already mentioned the bright sunlight when you are outside on a mobile screen, but it also is, like if you are in a bright environment and you haven't got good color contrast, you cannot see the information on a website. You need to have captions on videos for people that haven't got headphones and sit, let's say, in a noisy office, but they need to watch that particular video to get on with their work. If there are no captions, they will not be able to understand and take in the information. If you're on a quiet coach, on a train, you haven't got your headphones, you will not be able to watch the video that you want to watch if there are no captions. So it is very, very important to note that an accessible website is actually user-friendly for everyone. So that is actually a very, very big advantage, isn't it? Now, some very important and interesting statistics, and that's really where Callum and I started to develop our mission, because we discovered that in the UK, 70% of websites are actually not accessible for people with special access needs. That is actually quite a mild statistic, because other people would argue that 98% are not accessible. But I think we're sticking with the 70%. It's a very, very high number already. And compared with the US, the US has got a lot lower statistics there, because in 2017 there was a case where somebody sued Domino Pizza, and therefore and that person won the lawsuit. It went to the highest court and won a lot of money, and since then litigation for web accessibility has gone up 600%. This, of course, does not apply to us here in the UK because nobody enforces the legal side, although the Equality Act 2010 does not only cover buildings, it also covers websites. Most people are not aware of that. So the problem that this figure is so high is because websites in general are designed and developed to cater to the vision of the decision makers who, or the business owners, who want to have a certain look, who wanted to portray a certain image, but they actually do not think about accessibility requirements for people with special access needs. And that is not because they are mean-spirited, that is simply because there is no awareness. And so, unfortunately, this failure costs businesses around £17.1 billion per year as their potential customers click away from their website in frustration. That is not just disabled customers and impaired customers, that is anybody who can't get to grips with the website. There is a report that comes out every year. It's called the Click Away Pound Report, and the 2020 report is not out yet. So this figure comes from the 2019 report, and that is a very reliable source. Another reliable source is a BBC report from 2017, where the online spending power of people with access needs in the UK is now £24.8 billion, and that is rising. And the purple pound, which is actually the spending power of people with disabilities and their wider circle, like their family and friends, is worth 249 billion a year to the UK economy. That was in 2017. The figure will have gone up by now. So businesses and organizations simply cannot ignore the importance of web accessibility any longer. Because the 14 million of the 68 million UK population having special access needs or being registered as disabled, that makes 20% of the UK population. And that is also equivalent to 1 in 5 of potential customers or website visitors. And they simply cannot be ignored. Especially now, during the COVID-19 pandemic, we were catapulted into a digital world. Everything has moved to digital with more digital transactions than ever. And there are so many people, especially disabled and impaired people, that have no other contact with the outside world than the digital contact. So especially now it is so important to make websites accessible to everyone. So having a website that is accessible and therefore user-friendly to all types of customers, of course, opens up a wider audience and promotes sales growth. And another thing is that actually accessibility has got the same best practices as search engine optimization. So an accessible website will automatically rank higher with Google and other search engines than an inaccessible website. That is another big advantage. Now, Callum will show you now, will demonstrate what you can do to check if your website is accessible, because you may be thinking now, is my website accessible? So Callum will give you a few tips and show you on how to do that. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and hand over to Callum.
Thank you, Karen. Hello, everyone. I hope you're all enjoying the webinar so far. Let me just share my screen before we start. So if we just click on here. So yeah, in my demonstration, I'll basically just be covering most of what Karen has just said, but have more of a practical outlook. The reason why is because there is lots of documentation out there for website accessibility, but depending on your level of technical knowledge or coding knowledge, it might be difficult for some of you to know where to start or how to tell your developers to start making your website accessible. So we'll start off by looking at the free Wave tool. So, well, as I've just said, the Wave tool is completely free, and what it does is it's a AI tool which scans your website's code and scans the different color combinations. So what I mean by color combinations is text colors and background colors to make sure that the text is readable to people visiting your website. And basically, Wave, if you can scan your website using Wave in two different ways. So one, if any of you are Firefox or Chrome users, you can download the extensions from your web store, or you can go to this web address here. Hopefully you can all see where I'm pointing my cursor, wave.webaim.org. And yeah, that's basically what we're going to start the demonstration with. And we'll be using the Creative Inc. Agency.co.uk website for a demonstration, which is our website. And this will illustrate what everything should look like once the website is accessible. So if we just bear with me a second, if I get the web address up, because what we'll do next is we will copy and paste the web address where it says web page address in here, and then you press enter. And as you can see, once Wave has completed the scan, it will come up with a toolbar on the left with a preview of your website, where it basically annotates all of the different elements on your page. And just for context as well, you need to do this for every page. This doesn't scan every page all at once. You need to do it all individually. So what you basically need to be looking at, where my cursor is, this is basically general errors. So this is where your code is scanned, and then it will tell you where the errors are in your code and which code is not validated. So then, and it gives you the exact examples of the code, and so then you can point that out to your developer to start making the changes. Then we move on to the contrast errors, and as you might have already guessed, this is related to the contrast between your text color and your background. And what this is judged on is it gives the contrast between the background and the text. It gives a ratio, and the higher the ratio, the better the contrast. And you don't need to know this, but this is something your developers need to know, where the absolute minimum color contrast you should have on your website is 3:1, and then that's for bold text. So if you have bold text on your website, that's more likely going to contrast. with the background rather than text that isn't bold. And moving on to text that isn't bold, the colour contrast ratio that you need is 4:5:1. And I know I'm getting into too much technical detail here, so forgive me, but if you remember those ratios, it's a bonus, because then you can pass that on to your developer. So yeah, that's the free wave tool, and that's the free wave tool. So now moving on to checking if your website is keyboard accessible. So what do we mean by having a website that's keyboard accessible? It simply means where you use four keys will be your best friend if you're not able to use a mouse or a touchpad, as Karen covered on earlier, whether you have like a broken arm or any other situational limitations. Okay, so the 4 important keys that you will use to check whether your website is keyboard accessible is the tab key, the enter key, and the up and down arrow keys. And I won't go into too much detail about this, because what we will need in order to demonstrate to you what this does is the tab key. So what the tab key does is, or what it should do once you have the code in there to make your website keyboard accessible, is to press the tab key, and as you can see, there's an outline around the element that is being focused on. Now, this is a very important indicator to keyboard only users to know where they are on the page. And you should have this for links, headings, paragraphs, lists, and links. So if I just demonstrate to you what this will look like. So as you can see, the focus is on the image. And then if I press the tab key, it goes to the next element like this, and focuses on this heading here. And then if I press the tab key again, it goes to the next set of content, and so forth. Now, another important point to mention is that do you see this outline here where I'm focusing my cursor? This basically needs to be in direct contrast with the background color of the entire section. So then again, keyboard only users can see where they're navigating to. Okay, so that's checking whether your website is keyboard accessible. So now we'll move on to image or alternative text. And again, alternative text is a text alternative of an image. And as Karen said before, this is so then screen readers can read out what items are in the image. So then visually impaired users can get the gist of what the image is about. So to get the alt text up, you right click on the image itself, and then you go down to where it says inspect. And just bear with me here, because I need to do another screen share. And what I have to explain before I point out where the alt text is that this box here where it says DevTools at the top, where my cursor is, It's like a mini box that appears within your browser, and unfortunately Zoom won't let you see that. Oh, yeah. But yeah, anyway, I'll just point out I'll just point out where the alt text is. So again, where my cursor is, the blue text alt. This shows that you do have alt text, and then the orange text here is the alt text itself. And what you commonly find with alt text is that you usually, rather than doing an actual description of the image, you actually list all of the items in there. So and this is I feel a much simpler way to help screen readers to picture the image better, rather than putting like one or two sentences in. And before I move on to the next section, I'll make one more point about alt text. So this is basically where you guys are in control. You don't have to worry about this box. So I'll come back out and go back into the browser. So you can do this. So if your website is a WordPress website, if you have experience of logging into your WordPress site, you can go into your media library, upload an image, and then there's a box in there where you can type in all of your alt text. You don't basically have to have coding knowledge to insert alt text. So now, moving on to the next section, we'll basically talk about closed captions on videos. Now, closed captions help people who have hearing impairments, as Karen covered earlier, because of course, they won't be able to hear what's being said, what the person in the video is saying. And then there's also things where people are in noise sensitive in environments. So if like they're on, if it's like rush hour time and they're commuting to work on a train and they're watching a video, again, they might not be able to hear what the person is saying. And then when people are in an environment where they're in direct sunlight, this of course compromises the brightness of the screen that they're looking at. So they might not be able to see the hand gestures that people are giving, what actions they're putting in, all of that sort of thing. So if I do another screen share, getting myself into a bit of a tangle, I will start off basically by, just bear with me a second. I'll start off by showing you a video without closed captions. Struggle to browse the internet. So basically, I won't play the whole video, but in those first 5 seconds that I've just played, there was no subtitles there or transcripts. So I want to ask the rhetorical question: How will people with hearing impairments, people who are commuting to work on a train, or people who are in bright sunlight, how will they be able to hear what's going on or see what's going on? And this is basically where I will now play the video with the captions, which again I need to do another screen share for. So this is now the video with video captions, and I'll let you basically see the difference. I am autistic and I struggle to browse the internet. Okay, we'll stop the video there. Hopefully, if we go back to here, you can see that at the bottom of the screen, there's some white text, which are the closed captions, and there's a black box around it, just, you know, to make sure that there's a contrast with the white text and the background. And in terms of the difference there, no matter whether you're in bright sunlight or whether you're on a train, or you have hearing impairments, the white text on a black background will make it easy for anyone to see the subtitles. But you're probably asking yourselves one more question, and that is, where is the transcript for the gestures that I'm making? By the way, this is me in a video for us advertising web accessibility. But anyway, back to the point. Me gesturing, where's that? And that would usually appear in some transcripts in brackets, like it says Callum is doing a hand gesture like that to the left. Callum is doing a hand gesture to the right. So yeah, that's what having closed captions is all about. And the same approach can be taken for podcasts as well. So if we go back to Chrome, the next point is color contrast ratios, and this really follows a similar concept to Wave. So if we go to here to the A11Y color contrast accessibility validator, it's basically, again, where you copy and paste your URL and you click on the button again. And what this does is it really does the same as Wave, where it scans the color combinations between text background and the text color and the background color, and then it basically tells you if the text is readable on a certain background. But the difference between this and Wave is that it goes into more detail. It points out all of the different color contrast ratios, whereas, as you saw earlier, Wave doesn't. And the color contrast ratios that I covered earlier are here. But you can see that the color contrast ratios pass. And really, this is a useful link to pass on to your developer, because they will be able to get through all of these technical properties. So these properties involve the font family, the text size, style, weight, and line height, which should give them a better idea about what changes they need to make if a color contrast fails. So now that we've covered the color contrast ratio, oh yeah, of course, as well as Karen covered, this is mainly targeted towards cognitive impairments. So people like myself with autism, where sometimes black text is like a wave across the sea of a white background, and then also for colourblind people as well. But yeah, I'm clearly rambling on about that a bit, so we'll move on to the next point, which is clear text and instructions. And what we'll mainly focus on is firstly links and contact forms, because these are the most common areas where there's clear instructions are needed. So, for example, people with epilepsy will need to know where the link takes them to make sure that there's no flashing images or flashing content once the destination of the link is opened. And then also as well for people who have for people who are screen reader users, it's no good just putting on links, click here, read more, find out more, because they won't be able to see the outer context of the link. So the content here, for example, before the link, they won't be able to see that. So this is why links need to have more detail, not only to see where the link takes them, but also where the outer context of the link as well. So link text needs no, I'm contradicting myself there. So if we move on to contact form instructions, so this is, I'm mainly talking about this surrounding people with cognitive impairments and people with visual impairments. So they will need to know exactly what the purpose of the contact form is and why they will be contacting the business owners, basically. So now we move on to the alternative contact options, and we'll stay on this page. And as Karen covered earlier, this will mainly be catered towards people with speech impediments, whether they're hearing impaired, have a stammer, etc. And they obviously need different ways to communicate to business owners. So then we need text-based alternatives, such as a contact form, email address, or WhatsApp messaging. And these are absolutely essential, because if you don't have these, well, then you're obviously missing out on an order. If you have an online shop, for example. So then we move on to the next point, which is header structure and logical layout. So I won't go into too much detail about what header structure and logical layout caters for, because Karen explained this earlier. But what I will say is that there's 6 different types of headings. So I won't go through all of them, but I'll go through the main ones. So heading 1 are the main headings, and this should come at the start of a new section. Then you have your heading 2s, which are subheadings, and these should really be the different This should really be the headings for subtopics within a different section. And heading 3s are subheadings of heading 2s. And I guess you see there's a recurring pattern there, and it will be the same for the next 3 headings. And why this is important, putting them in the correct order tells screen reader users whether they're starting a new section, the importance of a point, and whether a certain piece of content is relevant to a particular section. So now we move on to the uncluttered layouts. And this is basically for people like myself who are cognitively impaired and struggle to read large blocks of text for a long period of time. And it's good to break up the text into grid layouts like this here, or to use images. So there's a change of scenery, and people with cognitive impairments can then change the focus to different elements on the page to be able to distract themselves and to not be, because it is quite exhausting for us to look at a large block of text for a period of amount of time. So as you might say, it gives us a nice break, really. There's so many websites from my experience, which is really frustrating, where they have articles, but there's hardly any images. There's hardly any grid layouts. And I probably only get to 50% of the article, unfortunately, which, yeah, it's just really frustrating for me. And obviously a lot of other people will be in the same boat as me. So finally, us collectively at Creative Inc., we highly recommend that you get a professional web audit done, as there's so many experts and professionals that'll be able to point out the errors to developers that need to fix it. And they basically know all of the different AI systems that are out there. And secondly, how to talk to your developers about fixing the issues. So yeah, I highly recommend getting a web audit. So yeah, that brings my demonstration to a close, and I will stop screen sharing and pass back over to Karen.
I've just noticed that I was on mute, so I'm very sorry about that. So I just wanted to say that I saw in the chat that some of you said that that you actually were that found that very technical, which I understand, and I promise you we didn't mean to scare you. We just wanted to give you an overview of what is actually sort of included in web accessibility and assessing a website and seeing where actually the problems are. So I hope you got quite a good idea, even if you thought that some of the things were a bit too technical. The main thing is that you realize that there may be issues on your website, and then you can pass them on to your web developer or ask somebody to do a web audit, like Callum says that we can do this, and then, you know, which is a part of a technical online audit and a manual audit. Now, how to fix web accessibility issues on your site. Now, we've got the long fix first, and that would be where you contact your web developer and ask him to fix your site after an audit. Now, this would be relatively easy, albeit it can be costly if your web developer is qualified in web accessibility. And it is really important that you find somebody who knows what they're doing, or get somebody to train your web developer, because the more the web developer knows, the less time it actually takes to have the site remediated. So that could take quite a long time, because you may wanted to be done over a certain period of time. So that's why we call it the long fix. Now then there's a quick fix. There are a lot of people that offer subscriptions to AI software, which is different to the Wave tool. It is software that gets put into the code of your website with one line of code, and you actually then see the website. You can make changes to the website at a press of a button, and people can sort of control how they view the website at the time. Now, this looks very impressive at first, but if we think about people that are disabled and impaired, they most of the time have already set up their systems on how they like to view websites. And if they come to a website, just one website that has got a system installed, and that system is not compatible with assistive technology, then it actually makes the website inaccessible. So it is, I would say, more a plaster over an open wound rather than a healing method. Now, therefore, we call this the best fix, and that is redesign and develop. And for that, you would commission a complete redesign of your site, or if you are planning to have a new site, you actually hire somebody who knows how to design and develop an accessible website right from scratch. And we are actually doing that for Sporting Heritage at the moment, because we are involved also in the Neurodiverse Museum project. And we are designing and developing the website for that project from scratch with accessibility in mind. So watch this space. So web accessibility in general is not a tick box exercise. It's a process, because web accessibility, it doesn't mean that you can just, you make the fixes, yes, you make it better, but it also means that you have to continue always thinking when you make changes on your website that you keep it accessible. It is an important part of continuing the process and allowing the UK a level playing field, because irrespective of cognitive differences, physical impairments, you want everybody to be always able to use your website. And for that, you need to anticipate the special access needs and implement them already in the design and development of your digital platforms, and at the same time react positively to user feedback. Because you cannot make it right for everybody every time. That is impossible. There are certain softwares that say they can make your website 100% accessible. And that is just not the case, because we're all human, we're not robots. And, and therefore everybody views it differently. But you don't need to be scared of that, because what you actually have to do is make a conscious decision to be helpful. And for that, you would have an accessibility statement on your site. And in that accessibility statement, you state what is accessible on the site, what you are doing for accessibility, what may not be accessible on your site, and then also give contact information for people that really want to use your service, but probably haven't got to grips with your site. But in the accessibility statement, you give them the opportunity to contact you to actually discuss that and say, look, this has not been accessible to me. And then you make that information accessible to them by talking to them. So that is what we are trying to achieve. We are actually wanting people to see web accessibility not as a tick box exercise, but as a process and an open conversation and a willingness to help. Now, this is the end of our presentation. I hope that we have given you a good understanding of what web accessibility is, and sort of made you aware of the issues, and also educated you on, you know, how to look at a website and see if it is accessible and how to fix it. So I'll pass over to Fran now again for the 10-minute Q&A session. So I hope there are a lot of questions to answer, and if not, then we're always happy to take questions later if you want to email us directly. So thank you very much for listening to me.
Thanks, Karen, and thanks, Callum. That was, yeah, a lot of information to take in, but I think, you know, really, really helpful, really good starting point. There have been some questions in the chat. So, Joanna, do you want to ask Callum and Karen just the clarification you had about captioning?
Yes. Hi, Karen and Callum. I just actually wrote in the chat when Callum talked about the closed caption, because I've only ever heard closed caption when I started Zoom, because I usually call it spontaneous translation, but I'm not sure whether that's something to do with interpretation. So what's the difference between subtitling and closed caption?
Right, I think that's a question for me to answer. Subtitling is for people that can hear, but that may not understand the language. That let's see, you watch a film, that a Danish film, and you want to know what is going on. They're actually quite good at Danish films, very good humor, and you want to know what is being said. Then the film, it has subtitles. Captioning means that it is actually for people who can't hear. And so in captionings, you will also find, you know, like closes door, breathes heavily. And that is, you know, like to add to the whole atmosphere of the, you know, of the actual video that you can see. Closed captions are that you actually have the opportunity to press a button and the captions go away. So it's basically closed captions, mean you can turn them on and off. So so I hope that that answers your questions, Joanna.
Karen, that's just amazing. That's, yeah, honestly, that's beyond, that's just so enlightening. Thank you.
So if we'd like to open up the floor, has anybody else got any questions for Karen and Callum? Alison.
Yeah, hello, can you hear me all right?
Yep, we can hear you.
So I just got a really quick question. There was a lot of talk about the contrast and the ratios, but are there some particular colour combinations that work really well to make a website accessible?
I'll answer that question. But I mean, the only ones that you can really think of off the top of your head are like black and white, or yeah, but black and white is the only one you can think of at the top of your head. But then it's just more about playing around really and seeing what ratios you get for colours. There's no real easy answer to say, really. Yeah.
I think I just butt in there as well. I think you can generally say that dark colors and light, you know, dark background colors, light text colors, light background colors and dark text colors are always give a better color contrast. But Callum is absolutely right in what he's saying. The best thing is always to actually look at it from a manual, you know, like sort of thinking, is this a good contrast? Or, you know, if you're not sure, run it through the color checker.
Jamie.
Yeah, do these sites you mentioned that check everything for you work on, for our society, we use Weebly because I can't build a website. So I use this Weebly thing, which seems to be brilliant. Do they work on sites like that? Yeah,
they do, yeah, because yeah, all you need to do is copy and paste the different colors into like these different color contrast tools, and then it will give you your ratios from there.
Great, thanks.
Yes, it works on the URL, Jamie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
that's brilliant.
It doesn't matter any platform, yeah.
Right.
And does the color contrast site that you showed us, Callum, is that similar in its approach to the Wave one, where you need to do it page by page, or will it look at?
Yeah, it's page by page.
Yeah, so you just need to put in each individual contrast. Okay, that's good to know. Has anybody else got any other questions? Well, while people are thinking, since we have Justine here, we should make the most of her. And as Karen and Callum said, their work with sporting heritage is part of our larger neurodiverse museum project. Justine, would you like to talk a little bit about the overall project?
Hello, can you see me?
Yes.
Hi all. Thank you so much for that. That was amazing. And I definitely echo what Joanna said. I didn't know that either. So that was brilliant. Good question. Yeah, so the Neurodiverse Museum has come about from us trying to understand and ensure that neurodivergent and autistic voice is at the centre of what museums do. It's come from sporting heritage, looking at how do we ensure that that happens? How do we make sure that everything that we do is driven by lived experience and that voice? And as we slowly started to develop that, we realised that that was bigger than just sporting heritage, and it was across the museum and cultural sector. So that activity is funded by Arts Fund at the moment. It's a pilot programme, and it's looking at some initial activity around how do we make venues and digital delivery accessible? How do we ensure that collections and the stories that museums tell are led by autistic and neurodivergent voice, so that we feel like when you go into a museum, okay, it represents me, and then how do we ensure that that is replicated into the workforce, and that becoming part of the museum and cultural organisational workforce is something that's possible and much more straightforward than it is at the moment. So you'll see lots of different pieces of training and activity coming out over the next couple of months as part of that programme, and then as it's a pilot, we're aiming to develop that and bring in more funding to make that a bigger programme over the next couple of years. So Sporting Heritage will share all that information. Our initial partners are Leeds Museums and the Golf Museum in St Andrews. And then you can also follow any of that work through at Neuromuseum, which is on Twitter. And very, very shortly, there'll be a website which Callum and Karen are creating for us. So you'll be able to see resources, research, activity on there. So yeah, that's where we're at the moment. Meet from?
I know. I've done this a couple of times recently. You think I'd know by now. So just thinking about where people could start. Obviously, you've shown us the demonstration, Callum, about picking up the errors on the pages, and then page contrast and the color contrast, and then all the other things that sit underneath it. If people go through that, is there, and there may not be an easy answer, but what would be your top place to start, or your top 3 things if people wanted to know where in all of the things you recommended today, what would be the things that would make the biggest change?
So I think number 1, I'd start off by doing a wave scan, as I said earlier, using the color contrast tool, and I can't really think of a third one.
That's
but
fine.
Those are really the 2 most basic areas I'd say to get started with.
I think if I could just say, I think keyboard navigation is really important, because it also feeds into the assistive technology compatibility. If you cannot see, if you tab through a keyboard and you cannot see where you are on the website, there is every chance that that website is not compatible with assistive technology, and also, you know, limits people who have got, you know, physical impairments, and then also alt texts for images. I think that is a really important thing as well. Wouldn't you agree, Callum? Because yeah, again, it ties. You're on mute.
Yeah, alt text as well is important. Yeah,
absolutely. And you know, we are human. We are not your robots. Just look at your website really critically and think, you know, like, if I had low vision, would I be able to read this? If I had autism, ADHD, or dyslexia, is the spacing between my text good enough? Are the fonts really fancy, or are they really, you know, straightforward? It's really put your sort of head on, you know, and try and put yourself into, you know, the shoes of people with special access needs, and look really critically at your website, I think that is the first thing that you should do, really, and the best thing.
Lovely, thank you. Are there any other questions? I know, Michelle, you were interested in cost, but I think maybe that you need to contact Karen and Callum directly to discuss that. Alison.
Sorry for the second question, and
No?
tell me off if this is skewing the subject too much, but I'm really interested in accessibility for social media because I'm doing some social media work at the moment. So which things should I be bearing in mind when I'm posting stuff and trying to engage people? Obviously, I'd want that to be as inclusive as possible. Have you got any suggestions for doing that, please?
Yes, I think that is a question for me to answer. The most basic things in social media, again, is really be clear and concise. Don't use abbreviations that other people may not know. And also alt text. All the major social media sites, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, they all have provisions in the images when you post them. You either click on where it says edit, and then it gives you the actual opportunity to put your alt text in. Or in LinkedIn, there is actually where you, where it says add alt text, comes in the corner section of the image. That is really, really important. I have a very good article on social media and accessibility, and I think I will share that with Fran, afterwards, so that Fran can then distribute that, because that talks about also, design and social media and different aspects. But I would say just, for the lay person, a very, very easy thing to do to make it accessible, make your text clear and add alt text.
Brilliant, thanks.
Lovely. Are there any other questions? Well, I'd like to say a massive thank you to Karen and Callum for giving us such an informative session today. And as Justine said, hopefully this is the beginning of a range of training that we will be able to provide to support accessibility across neurodiverse audiences. I will send out in the next week or so the link to this recording and a copy of Karen's presentation, and that will have all their contact details in and the web links. I will also double check if there's anything else that's come up in the chat today that's not included in the slides, and make sure you've got that as well. There will also be a little bit of evaluation which helps us with our training programme. So if unless there's anything else anybody would like to say, I'd like to bring the session to a close, and I hope everybody has a really great rest of their Friday. Thank you.
Can I just say, just as a end note, Callum and I, obviously we do run a business, yes, but we also run a mission. And for us, it is really, really important that people support that mission, because we cannot make the UK digitally inclusive by 2025. And I think support doesn't have to be hiring us. It also has to be supporting us on social media. So you can find on our website all our social channels, and just give us a like, give us a share. That, is worth a lot to us as well. So web accessibility is really, really important in these times. And we hope that we have made it a little bit more personal and tangible for you, rather than it just being sort of a technical term and it being like a tick box exercise. So thank you so much for listening.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thanks for listening to myself as well. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. Well, I think you'd be safe in the knowledge that everybody's going to be checking their web pages, if not over the weekend. So all these people ticking through all their colour contrasts, but next week. But yes, thank you everybody much for coming, and thank you again to Karen and Callum, and hopefully we'll see everybody again soon. Thank you, goodbye.